suppose what I wanted to do when we're going through this in a bit more detail is I'm going to screen share some of the different documents I have, and they'll show the
Yeah.
top firms, they'll show the directors, they'll show the owners, and I'll just give people a bit of an explanation of what goes into this. Because I saw a lot of people, very well-meaning people, who are like, can you not just automate that, or can you use AI, or this should be easy. And you sort of go, yeah, it should be, but it's not, unfortunately. It'd be great if it
Yeah.
was. So what you're seeing here is the top companies that have taken money in relation to provision of services to Ukrainians or asylum seekers, including accommodation. So you see these top kind of four guys coming in at over 100 million. And then, as you see, it just keeps on going. There's about 100 people on the list, 100 different companies that have at least 10 million. Now, I showed some of this in the live stream last week, but I think I kept it much more zoomed in. Now, I should say all of this is working data. So some of these people are going to move, things are going to work around the place. One of the problems we've run into actually is, I mean, you'd look at that and you think that Cape Wrath is the number one earner. 154 million is the most any company has made. And that is true in individual companies. But what we started seeing is that several of the smaller companies are owned by the same people or owned by the same family. And actually, when you start looking at it that way, there are other people who've pulled in 180, 190, 200 million above Cape Wrath, but Cape Wrath runs it all as one thing, and it is what it is. So one of the things I've been trying to think about is, this is part of the database we're going to make publicly available. We'll put it up on the site. It'll be available to subscribers. People will be able to go through it, see the companies, and just peruse it at their own usage. But what I'm trying to think about is, what can we do with it that makes it a bit more useful to people? And one of the things that I've been thinking of is visualizations like this. Can you see that, Jason?
I can indeed, yeah.
So this is what's called a racing chart. And what this actually does, it shows you the top 10 companies over time. So from 2020 to 2025. And I'm trying to figure out how much of this sort of stuff I can do, in a reasonable kind of time frame and without basically spending too much money on it, because these are all fine when you've got one or two, but as you start going up, this software costs 10, 20,000 euro, that sort of range. Also, I really like how Cape Wrath kind of comes out of nowhere and then just dominates the field entirely within
This is like
a year.
the world's most sinister horse race.
It is. And so that's part of what I've been looking at, part of like the data analytics. The real, I think, value that we can provide to people here is less about the companies, because that's interesting and it's good to know, and more about who owns these companies and who are the directors, who are the people behind it. And the problem there is there's just so much information. And I'll give you an example. I'll show you one particular thing. Here is Cape Wrath and who it's owned by. And if you see on the right, on the left here, it has in green the one. Every company that has a one in front of it comes from Cape Wrath in some way. So in order to find the owners of Cape Wrath, these are the companies I've needed to go through. The ones in red are offshore, Guernsey, Virgin Island, Isle of Man. And in the owned by, these green squares are the names, the names that I could attach to either having owned it or having previously owned it. So that's 52 lines or 51 lines of data to find
I would note as well how many of those on the right are highlighted in green, because obviously so many of them are just further companies, holding companies, investments. It's Russian doll stuff.
Oh yeah, so in the end, I could only figure out about 35% of the ownership of Cape Wrath before you get into the offshore places. Now that can be chased up. We can do more there, but you start looking at massively increased costs. It's massively more complex. You probably need to bring in a third party who specializes in corporate intelligence or has access to offshore registers of beneficial ownership. Not all of them are like that. Some of them, you might only have 3 companies, you might only have 4 companies. Some of them are just one company, and you look at it and you kind of go, oh, Joe Bloggs owes this with his wife, and you're grand. But when you're starting to look at this, you're looking at, I would suspect, let's say we have 1,000 companies on the list. I would suspect when you start pulling in all these companies, it will require analyzing probably somewhere in the region of 3 to 5,000 companies. Now, each of those companies will probably have somewhere in the region of 3 to 10 directors. So that's where you start kind of running into real numbers.
Yeah.
And one of the things I know now is that I know that Gript now have better information on the state of play here than any of the departments or the Companies House in Ireland, for this reason. If you're registered as a director of a business in Ireland, they take your name and it's publicly searchable. But if, let's say your name is John Smith and you say you live in Dublin, and
Yeah.
you register a second company and say your name is John P. Smith and you live in Dublin, and then you say your name is John Peter Smith and you live in Dublin, and then you say your name is John Smith and you live in Offaly. That is
Mhm.
4 people to the CRO, 4 entirely separate people. So what I've been doing is I've been pulling out the directors of some of the higher level ones and using date of birth to basically match these people together. So
Very good.
we've basically deduplicated a lot of the ownership data. Now the thing there is that is of, I'm doing it primarily because I think it's interesting and it's valuable. But when you start looking at at doing it for everyone, you start looking at the question of how feasible is that? And that kind of goes to what people were saying about fundraising. Would we fundraise to basically make this a visual, searchable database where we find out all the owners, even in
Yeah.
offshore accounts, we make it searchable, we do the visualizations, we do all of that, and we do it for at least, the top 100 to 600 companies. And the problem there is to do that, just for the software you'd need and the access to data you'd need, I worked out it would cost us probably about 150,000 euro.
And
And
that's leaving aside the manpower hours you would have to
oh
put
yeah,
in as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it would probably end up being me doing it. I might have to bring in a data researcher, and this could be months of work. And obviously that's not included. I will just this little kind of niggling annoyance here. One of the things that annoys me about that is about 63 to 75,000 euro of the cost there is access to the CRO's database. Because we could do this where we give the directors and owners and it's kind of a snapshot in time. But what
Mm.
you really want is you want to be able to have it where people can go and look at it and it updates automatically. So
Yeah.
if the company is sold or if a director is changed, that you can go in and you go, oh, this guy is in, and he's also a director of these 7 companies. And in order to do that, you need to get access to the company's house, the CRO. And we thought, that's no problem. They have an API, which for those who are non-technical is basically a data hook that you can basically take data from automatically. And we could basically link to it and it would fill that out. And then it turns out that the free API doesn't actually include directors or owners or any of the information we'd want. And in order to get access to that for a year, not a lifetime, for a year, it costs 63,000 euro. Now, the company's house is under the Department of Enterprise. This is statutorily required information. So I'm not quite sure that that's entirely kosher, particularly because
Mhm.
when Company House started charging for it, it was 10,000 euro. And then I think it jumped to 12,000. And then the year after it was 63,000. So I think less than 10 people in the country, including companies, have access to this data in that way. And so a massive amount of the cost of this is actually just giving the state money to let you do it.